Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Stephanie, co-founder of Airdomo. Welcome back to my favorite day of the week, Wednesday, where we get to educate you and share our knowledge about global real estate. And today we're talking about something that almost no one focuses on when buying international property. Actually, no one focuses on this when buying anything quite a bit, right? And so most buyers spend their time thinking about everything else, but they don't think about the exit. So they think about where to buy, what to buy, right, Hannah? They don't think about, okay, but what happens when I have to sell it? They don't think about how much it might grow. There's just all kinds of things that they don't think about when it comes to the exit. How will I exit this investment? And so that's what we're going to dive into today. So I'm excited. We're going to talk about the exit strategy most buyers never defined until it's too late. And then I got to deliver that bad news. And I hate that. Dun, dun, dun.
Exactly. So I think this topic is important because exit is where everything really becomes real. Because up until that point, yeah, it was great. It was yours. You enjoyed it. But now it's time for what's going to happen, right? So on paper, that deal can look great. It has strong appreciation projections. It has good rental potential. It has attractive pricing. But none of that matters if we can't convert it into a real outcome later. And what I think we see often with our clients is that buyers only start thinking about exit when they need to sell, which is
Yep.
usually the worst time to figure it out. So today's about flipping that and making exit part of the decision from day one and ahead of time. So let's talk about that, why buyers ignore exit.
Oh, well, that is easy. It's easy because it's exciting, right? Buying is so exciting, and exciting feels distant. When buyers are entering a market, they're focused on the opportunity. They're focused on the lifestyle. When we're good at selling something, as agents, as real estate brokers, right? When we're out in the field, we're focused on that lifestyle and how great everything's going to be. And so are those buyers. They're focused on the upside. The exit feels like it's so far off in the distant future that let's not even think about that problem. Let's just kick that can down the road. So many buyers assume that if I can buy it, I can sell it, right? If I can buy it, I can sell it, not a big deal. But that's not always the case, especially internationally, because each market has different levels of liquidity. We've covered this on so many different webinars. That's why a lot of these things tie together. But also, there's different buyer profiles, there's different resale dynamics, and these things change year to year, sometimes, country to country. So the ability to exit is not always guaranteed, and you have to be comfortable with that.
And I think also that assumption is one of the biggest blind spots because buying is usually easy,
Yep.
especially in emerging or international markets, but selling depends on who's on the other side of that transaction later, where that transaction is happening, how is it happening, and that's where things get much, much more selective. So let's dive deeper into that. How should buyers think about their future buyer?
That's the most important questions, or one of the most, okay? Because who will want this property after me? That could be local buyers, potentially international investors, lifestyle buyers, or maybe a very niche segment, okay? Each of these groups, they behave differently. And so, for example, local buyers might be price sensitive. So you got to think, okay, about, okay, how does the local market approach the real estate, okay? Because, an international buyer, they might prioritize brand and pay a little bit more, right? Investors might focus purely on yield. What can I rent this for? Or how much is that short term rental income going to net me throughout the course of that year, right? So if your property only appeals to a very narrow group, then your exit becomes more difficult. You want to try to have that property appeal to at least maybe two of those groups. Does that make sense?
Exactly. In a way, you're not just buying a property, you're stepping into a future transaction already, unless you're buying for forever, which is pretty rare. And the more people who can realistically participate in that transaction, the stronger your position really becomes. But I think liquidity is probably the real test. So let's talk about how does liquidity factor into this?
Well, that's going to determine how easily you can sell and at what price you can sell. Some markets are highly liquid, strong demand, consistent transactions are happening, international visibility. And then others are much, much slower, limited buyer pools, longer sales cycles, more negotiation pressure, right? It might be a buyer's market. A property might look attractive at the purchase, but if the market is illiquid, exiting can take significantly longer and it will require price adjustments. And so that's what you've got to look for in the future.
And I think that's where expectations really do need to match reality because a higher price on paper doesn't mean much if the market can't absorb it really when you're ready to sell.
That's right.
So let's talk about how does time horizon affect that exit strategy?
Well, it's critical. And if you have flexibility in timing, you can wait for the right buyer, right? If you have all the time in the world, that right buyer eventually will come along. Okay. You also could wait for the right market conditions, wait for the right, for the market to rebound potentially. But if you need to sell quickly, your options get more narrow. That's when pricing pressure increases, negotiation power decreases, right? Because the buyer has the upper hand, and liquidity matters the most. So buyers should always ask, if I needed to exit sooner than planned, what would that look like? And can I live with it?
And that's where the planning creates leverage, really, because I don't think everyone's goal is to just exit. It's to exit on your terms, not under pressure, and basically get your investment back.
That's exactly right.
So, yeah, I think there are some common exit mistakes that happen, and you've seen them a million times. You have a million stories on this. What are the most common mistakes buyers make when it comes to exit?
Well, the biggest ones are buying based purely on personal taste. You all, that happens so often. It's that is their personal taste. I see it and I'm like, oh gosh, it is just so right for that one personal taste. But then for 90% of what's left out there of the buyer pool, I'm thinking they are not going to want this. And so you got to be thinking about that. People that are ignoring the resale demand. There might be something hot going on right now, but let's look at what could possibly be happening in the future demand for that market, and overestimating that future price growth. Not understanding local selling processes as well. That's a huge. You've got to understand how all of those things happen. You can change, or government can change the way that all pans out. Right now, so many areas are saying buy here and we will grant residency, but they can easily pull that back as well too. So you have to take that into consideration. Entering markets with limited transparency, right? That again, they could be changing periodically or frequently, which means they may not keep some of those strategies in place at all times. And so when you can't, none of us can guarantee anything, okay? But when things are on a roller coaster consistently, just assume they're going to be on the roller coaster when you exit.
Exactly. And I think what's interesting is that none of these feel like mistakes when you're at the very beginning. They only become visible when the buyer tries to convert the asset back into that liquidity that they
Right.
started with, and they realize all those constraints.
That's right.
So, given all of your experience and so many clients that you've been through with this specifically, tell us how experienced buyers think about exit.
Well, they think about exit from day one. They ask, who is my buyer pool? How active is this market? right? How truly active is it? How many buyers are actively looking and how many purchases are happening every single month? Okay. What drives the demand here? Why are people coming? Why are people buying here? And how long do properties typically take to sell? Are they on the market for 30 days or are they on the market for 3 years? What would make this property attractive later? Look, they're not just buying an asset, they're buying into future resale environment. And the other thing you've got to add into that is what is this property going to be like condition wise in it when it comes time to exit, right? What's the maintenance going to be like in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, right? Because look, that can change everything. What does your surroundings look like? You have that water view today, but are you allowed to keep that trimmed? And is that water view going to remain there? Or are you not allowed to trim that? And in 30 years from now, it's all grown up and you no longer see that beautiful ocean, right? There's so much of that to consider, so much of that due diligence, which is extremely important to do. But again, those are all things that we're here to help you do.
And by doing that, because instead of hoping the market works in your favor later, you're already positioning yourself within a market that already supports your exit and you're good to go.
Yeah.
So let's close this off with what all of our viewers usually love most is when you give them a framework. So if we want to simplify this, what should someone focus on when it comes to a simple exit framework?
Well, I would suggest 3 questions. Who is the most likely buyer for this property later? Right? What does that buyer look like? What does that makeup look like? How active and liquid is that buyer pool? Right? Where's the buyer coming from? Where's their money coming from? Are they financing? Is it legacy money? What does it look like? And then would I still be comfortable holding this if the exit takes longer than expected? Can I hang on to it for 2 years while I wait to get that liquid back? If those answers are very clear, then the exit risk is much lower and you're good to go. You can get what you want now and not worry so much about that exit in the future if it's going to take longer than expected.
Exactly. And I think that's something we really want to emphasize is this is the full life cycle of an investment. It doesn't end when you buy the property, it ends when you exit it. And I think what this conversation really shows is that the exit, it's not the end of the decision. It's part of your next beginning, right? So for everyone watching, if you're still considering buying international property, which of course you are, taking the time to think about that exit up front can completely change the quality of your decision. And the people you talk to about that are very important. On airdomo.com, you can explore those opportunities across multiple global markets, and you can start evaluating them not just on entry, but how they perform at exit as well. And if you'd like support with that, of course, book a call with us and we'll help you think through both sides of that transaction, not just the purchase. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next session.
Bye, everyone.